And we are live. How's it going, everyone? Super excited today because we have two special guests, Cedric and Meg, co founders from Airvent, the Web3 gaming studio that is building a free to play and play to own auto chess battler. The game is called Star Garden and it exists within the mysterious Project Eluune world. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and add them in on here. Cedric, Meg, amazing to have you guys on today.
Hi, Greg. Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you very much. We're excited as well.
Of course. Yeah. So I gave a brief little description there. And before we get too far in, hopefully I didn't but butcher the name of your guys' studio in the game, but really to just lay the context. I think this is, as I was mentioning right before we jumped on here, what gets me really excited is looking at the background of teams that are coming into the Web3 space. And it looks like you guys have a really good blend of talent, people that know both gaming but also are very involved within Web3. So it'd be great to get some context on the team's background and the beginnings of Aravent and Project Eluune.
Awesome. Yeah, and going back on the name Project Eluune or Project Eluune, it's so funny because people interpret the name as they want, and you decided for Project Eluune, and some other people prefer Project Eluune. Okay, so Megan and I are the co-founders, and what happened is we met in 2016, 2017 when we started to work together at a VR startup called Emblematic Group. And basically, we're shipping XR, VR, MR experiences for massive clients like Google, AT&T, PBS. And there's a few things that happened to us during this journey that led us to where we are today. One of them was we were building these new technologies, bringing and bridging new technologies together, and we had teams of very highly skilled humans building these experiences with us. And one of the things that happened is automation and artificial intelligence were moving so fast that our teams started to decrease in size. And that was kind of like a light bulb moment for us where we were like, wow, automation is coming for everybody. And we started to think about, like, how do we think about human purpose and the future of work in a world where humans are becoming more and more obsolete? How do we create virtual worlds where humans are the center of purpose, where they can build and own the value that they build, and also earn an income from these virtual worlds? The second thing that happened was we were spending a lot of time in virtual worlds, in social media, and in multiplayer online games. And one of the things that we saw is, and that we realized, that the social layer of digital world has actually never really been built. It's actually hard to make new friends online. You think about social media, it's like big airport terminals. Everybody's going into different directions, have different expectations, and it's hard to make meaningful connections. And it's similar to multiplayer online games. Like played Fortnite, League of Legends, but also like Apex and Dota. And what you see is that gameplay is always at odds with being social. So these games are amazing when you already have friends, but when you don't have these friends, you're paired with anonymous people that you'll never see again. They're accessible at a click of a button, and there's a lot of toxicity. And why is the toxicity happening? Because imagine today I'm having a great day, I'm having fun, I'm playing League of Legends. I don't really care about winning. I just want to be chit chatty with other people. I want to make new friends. And I'm paired with Megan, whom I never met, and maybe she had a shitty day. And she's super stressed and she has 25 minutes and she wants to win. If we're paired on the same team, we're not going to be friends, and because we have different expectations. And this creates toxicity. And we know that toxicity is one of the biggest factors of players stopping playing games. So at the end of 2019, we left the VR startup to build our own studio. And our goal was to basically create the next era of virtual worlds, the next era of gaming, and the next era of social media. Like, how do we think about building virtual worlds that have these two pillars, which is human empowerment through play to earn games, and human connections, which is like the infrastructure of how humans can make new friends in these games. And like going back to the team, one of the things that we were looking for was a third co-founder who had not only the expertise but the knowledge of building long-term, long-tail sustainable economies, but also systems where players feel valued and can find excitement over the course of many years, not just a few weeks of gameplay. And it took us about 6 months of intense research everywhere on the web and reading books. And finally, we found our third co-founder, Ramin Shahrizad, and we found him completely randomly by reading articles on the internet. And he posted an article in 2010, and the article was about the metaverse, how to build the metaverse. And he was already talking about how blockchain technologies would be necessary to basically build infrastructure for the future. And as we were reading the article, we basically realized that he had the same kind of like vision, long-term vision that we had, but also he was sharing the same ethical precepts that I think are super important, because all of these technologies can be used for good, but they can also be used for bad. So we pitched the company to Ramin, and he basically joined us in mid 2020, and that's where we really started to think about building the team, how to scale, and thinking about that we needed a team that's both composed of AAA game veterans, but also crypto natives, because the approach of Web 2 gaming to go into Web 3 is not the right approach. Like what we see in Web 3 is really a way that people can collaborate and build alongside you as you build products. And I think that was super important to us, like thinking about how do we involve our community and players as we build these new things, because people want to be involved, people want to have skin in the game. And of course, you don't want to build a product in a vacuum. You want to make sure that this is something that people get excited about.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting, Cedric. There's a lot to break down there, but really what stood out to me were a few things. One, that you guys have experience in VR and AR, and it seems like this has been massively towards where the metaverse is postured towards. So having that experience and then moving into Web3 and understanding both sides of it, and having something like the two pillars that you guys are looking to build not only have social connection but empowerment as well. And I think a big thing is being within Web3 and understanding what the metaverse should be, in the sense that so many people are building different things and there's not necessarily a right answer. But when you come in with a lot of experience previously with the technology, also probably see people in the space who weren't as successful trying to build similar things, and really looking and nitpicking a team that can go and build something that's sustainable but also revolves around those pillars that you mentioned, I think is incredibly important. And it's also something that gets me excited to see teams like Aravent building things like this to, I guess, move forward and start unwrapping this more. It'd be great to hear about Star Garden and the Project Eluune world, and really what the goal behind building this is. I think we definitely glossed over it, but it would be great to get a little more in depth to what this specific game is that you guys are building.
Megan, do you wanna tell a little bit about the story and kind of how we started with Discord and introducing people to our world?
Yeah, so basically, when we first decided that we were going to, come out of stealth mode and open up to starting our Twitter accounts and our Discord server, we really wanted to lean into the lore, because our lore has actually been in development since about 2016. And we really wanted to start breadcrumbing all these different aspects of this really beautiful, large world that we have. And so basically, on our Twitter account, the conceit was that we are Project Eluune. We're a company, we're a gaming studio that started receiving these kind of strange messages from this mysterious Eluune. So we received this first message that was basically a call for help. And after we received that message, we started getting these transmissions from this world. We started getting more images, more information. And basically, what we wanted to do was, in the same way that we want to incentivize collaboration and teamwork in the game Star Garden, we also wanted to think, okay, how do we, even just from the very early days on Twitter and on Discord, begin to do that as well? So we incentivize people to come into the Discord and kind of decipher all of these puzzles and clues together in order to unlock more of the story and get us closer to mint. So from the very early days, we were always putting out our motto, which is only together we transcend. And that's from everywhere across the Solana ecosystem, right? That's how we think about all the games in the ecosystem. That's how we think of all of the players in our game. And that was a huge kind of introduction and cultural point for us of wanting to create the right kind of community in our Discord right from when we launched.
Yeah.
And then I can add on what the game is. So the game is called Star Garden, and the idea here is that players arrive in this world, and right away they are paired in a tribe of 5 to 40 people, which you can also call a team or a guild. And they arrive on the Star Garden, which is this floating island, uh, floating above this mysterious world of Eluune. And the idea here is that players every day are dropping quests and decide of what quests are going to be pursued with the team. So like there's too many quests that you can that can be done, and so players have to come together and decide, okay, what is the path that we want to take for the Star Garden? And depending on the path that you take, different structures are going to be built on your Star Garden, and these structures basically unlock creatures, and these creatures you can use for combat. And so the loop is basically you're entering combat with the creatures against the environment, against other tribes are getting rewards, and then you're optimizing your roster of creatures with other players on your Star Garden, and basically deciding on the synergy of your creatures. The way that it works is we're kind of like a game that's like an RPG, a multiplayer RPG, mixing with mechanics of auto chess, auto battler games. So like similar to Teamfight Tactics or Illuvium. And but the big difference with our game is that you're sharing the Star Garden with 5 to 40 people. You're sharing the board where you place your creatures with 5 to 40 people, and you're entering quests together. And so the game is extremely social, and the success of the team really depends on the team's ability to create synergies and to create optimal communication between themselves. Um, what else can I say again on the game?
Yeah, I think that kind of going back to also like Greg's question about like what is kind of the mission around the game. Our goal was really to leverage technology to create a virtual world, a game where people can make meaningful connections, and that they're actually incentivized to form long-term communities through collaborative gameplay. And I think that's what is the real factor that sets us apart from a lot of other multiplayer games in the space.
Because and one thing to add to what Megan is saying is like the big difference between us and a traditional multiplayer online game is that instead of changing your team every match, so like every 25 to 45 minutes, and be paired with new anonymous players that you'll never see again, in our game you can stay with the same team over the course of days, months, years. And the matches basically enable you to progress as a player. So you never go back to scratch. You'll always, so like you're starting at level 1, your creatures are starting at being small creatures, and you're always evolving through the game, increasing your player level, increasing the power of your Star Garden and your team and your creatures. And the thing that it enables us to do is, as Megan is saying, to create basically the Star Garden as being a backdrop where players see each other constantly, communicate with each other constantly, and are able to basically break the ice and build these meaningful relationships. The other thing that we do is that the game will be geolocalized, so that should you build these meaningful relationships, you can actually, because when you start the game, you can decide to be paired with people in your local area. So then that really helps people if they want to meet in real life. And the other interesting thing is that every day you have tribe battles, which are basically friendly competitions with other Star Gardens. And some of these matches will also be geolocalized, so that similar to the real world where you think about soccer, you have League 1, League 2, League 3. League 1 is for pro players, but League 3 is really for smaller teams in their local areas to meet in real life. The same is going to be able to happen in our game. And so this is also going to increase esports abilities for our game.
Yeah, that's super sweet. And I think a big thing here that I'm starting to pick up on is how important even just to put some more context here, how important it is for games to be fun and it to be enjoyable for the player. And you guys outlined the idea of the lore and how you really have been building this up now for a while. And this is something obviously key to games that maybe a lot of people have oversight, but the idea of the lore is that it creates more to the game, and there's always something ongoing, some sort of meta game in the background, which is incredibly important. And then further on top of that, just talking about the hyper socialization that you guys are looking to do. It's not just a normal auto chess battler, which personally myself, I very much enjoy the strategy like games, but then you guys are also turning it and adding more aspects that make it like a MMO, where people are actually able to share the battlefield instead of just one or two or three players on the battlefield at once. It sounds like there'll be 7 to 40 on each team. So hearing this, and then how you guys are also looking to do things like localization, I think that is really exciting and nails back to those two pillars that you guys touched on, of being something that rewards socialization and is also empowering there. So I think that's super exciting. I guess where I'd like to ask here, as we've started to get into the game loop, how people will level things up and share Star Garden, I'm curious, what was the thoughts here of going and tying in the blockchain and NFTs into the game? What is the main idea behind that? I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's multiple layers to this answer. The first one is when Megan and I started to really think about building sustainable economies in virtual worlds, we realized that play to earn gaming is not new. It actually existed between 1999 and 2004 in games like EverQuest, Ultima Online, and even World of Warcraft at the early beginning. And one of the things that we realized is that, and this was called by many experts in gaming, the golden age of gaming. And what you had at the time, and it's also something that we realized from our co-founder was one of the first cyber athletes in the world to quit his job because he was selling digital assets in Ultima Online and EverQuest.
Interesting.
And so, but what he saw is that the game developers themselves were against these economies. Why? Because they didn't see any revenue going to them. The revenues were going to gold farmers, to people who were extracting a lot from these economies. The other thing that was happening is you had a ton of scams because none of these transactions were secure. So like you had a ton of people trying to get these digital assets and basically wasting a ton of money because nothing was secure. The other thing that was happening is the economies at the time were not set up to be sustainable. So you had huge inflationary mechanisms where economies were flooded with assets and that were losing value each day. And so players were spending money, but also wasting a ton of money because their assets were not valuable because they could be copied, and there was a lot of spoofs and other issues with these economies. So one of the things that's super interesting with blockchain is that you can secure transactions. There's no need of scams anymore. And also the interesting thing is the developer doesn't have to be part of these transactions. Like the economy can be built directly by players for players, and enabling a trading and an interdependency between them where the developers doesn't even have to be an intermediary. And I think that's really fantastic and fantastic and liberating for people. But the other thing that's interesting with blockchain is you can create systems where your assets are protected by a sustainable economy, where you can make sure that the economy is set up in a way that your assets are not going to lose value over time because the economy is flooded. Of course, this is more of like a experts in I mean, the new systems of economic designs are going to be very important there because I think it's still a new field. And so there's a lot of things that we see currently with play to earn economies is a lot of them fail because they don't set up things um, correctly. Am I missing something, Megan, on this? Is there something else we can add?
No, I think that the most important thing for us and other kind of like driver behind everything that Cedric was saying is that it was just important to us, right, that players are able to play a fun game socialize and have fun, but then also be able to reap value from all those contributions that they make, right? I think so many times, and even beyond gaming, right? Anywhere that you go on the internet, our time and our attention is always commoditized, right? But usually the players are not the ones who are able to reap any of the benefits from that. So we really wanted to create a world where players are really, truly valued. They truly own their assets and they can reap those benefits.
And I think another thing to add is to build on what Megan is saying. We've been experiencing for the last 20 years, but really in the last 2 3 years, a world where people are leaving the real world and trying to digitize their identity in the virtual world. Like one of the examples we tell to people is that nobody has seen Megan's car in the last 2 years because of COVID, because of a bunch of things that happened. And so it's very hard for people to flex in the real world. And so now we're looking for new avenues of not only building our digital identity, but also creating flexing possibilities for ourselves in these new virtual worlds. And I think doing this before blockchain was very hard because it's so easy in virtual worlds to basically copy paste digital assets, which is not something that you can do with blockchain. And so it's giving new possibilities for users to trust a system that enables them to really trust the value of the money that they put in these assets. And that's super interesting because if I can trust a system like this, where I know that there's no intermediaries, where I know that it's decentralized, then I'm much more confident in spending money. And all of this is amplified if you also add the social layer. Because if I know I'm going to see people again, if I know I'm going to be able to play with these people over the long term, then I basically want to make sure that my identity is clearly defined and explored, and I'm going to have less issues spending money in these types of games or virtual world. And this creates a virtuous loop because the more you're social, the more you want to spend money on your identity. The more you do that, the more you want to be social, and this creates a virtuous loop that is completely amplified by the advent and power of blockchain technology.
Definitely. And this is something where I played a lot of games growing up. So instantly, when this idea of being able to leverage the blockchain, having a public ledger, and then even further having in game assets such as NFTs on this public ledger made a ton of sense. As you mentioned, things like a lot of these economies already had value tied to them, whether it was things like EVE Online or World of Warcraft or even a ton of other games. But the general outlet for a lot of these was backdoor gray markets, typically through threads and forums, and the odds of getting scammed were fairly high. So a lot of these things have already existed. It's just a more transparent way of putting it on the blockchain, being able to track it all and really have value that could be transferred within ecosystems. I don't think it's something where everyone who plays games will now be able to become a millionaire, but at the very least, people who spend a lot of time playing games can transfer that potentially into other gaming ecosystems. So even little things like that, if you did put 1,000 to 10,000 hours into a game and then being able to transfer some of that value elsewhere or into a new ecosystem that you're spending a lot of time in, I think is incredibly massive. And to keep moving forward off of this idea, I think there's a couple things that would be good just to touch a little bit on the founding Star Gardens, what's going on with that. And then from there, we can jump into some exciting stuff as well.
Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about Star Gardens?
Well, I think maybe do we just want to first kind of explain a little bit more of how the founding Star Gardens work in the game, and then I can share some alpha about the Star Gardens maybe afterwards.
Yep,
Okay,
that's
sounds good.
perfect.
So Star Gardens are crucial in the game because all the gameplay happens on the Star Garden. As soon as the player arrives, they're paired on the Star Garden, and that a Star Garden can host between 5 to 40 people. And it starts with 5, and as you progress in the game, as you really build these relationships, as you become stronger, that's when you can start adding more people to it. The reason why we chose the 40 as a maximum is because there's a lot of studies that were done, scientific studies that show that the most optimized teams and the most optimized tribes were the ones that were hovering around the number of 40 to 45. The other thing that the Star Garden is important, the reason it's important is because you're always building on your Star Garden. You're adding new structures, and these structures act as tech trees that unlock new creatures for your entire tribe. And so you're basically accruing a ton of value on these Star Gardens because, let's say I start today on the new Star Garden, there's nothing built on it. But if you, Greg, and Megan are in the Star Garden that's been inactive for 6 months, then there's a ton of stuff that's been built on it and that stays on it, because like all the construction, all the things that are unlocked are basically stored in the metadata of that NFT. So every Star Garden is an NFT. The interesting thing that we did with the founding Star Gardens is that it's going to provide access to beta to our users. So like they'll be the first players to be able to play the game. The other thing is it's giving them special affinity with certain domains in the game. There's 20 domains in the games, some that are entry-level domains, so domains that players interact with right away. And then there's more advanced domains that it takes a few months and sometimes a little more to get access to. And so having a Star Garden that has an affinity with a domain provides special bonuses related to the players and the metagame. It's never giving a pay-to-win advantage, but other types of advantages. And the other thing that we did is we're launching a mini game in May, and owning a Star Garden, we basically allow users to receive special treats related to that mini game. So like every month, there's going to be a drop to owners of a Star Garden that they can basically use in the mini game. Megan, am I missing anything on this?
No, I think that's a kind of great summary of kind of what our founding Star Garden owners have to look forward to. And something that I have gotten authorization to drop a little bit of alpha here today with you and Greg is that this week we have some actually exciting things happening in the Discord. I can't reveal too much, but basically owning a founding Star Garden this week will be very helpful. If you're in the Discord and just happen to see a creature roaming about, it will be a very handy thing to have. And so we're actually going to be launching a giveaway, potentially even right now. I'm not sure if it's already up, but there's a giveaway that's going to be happening today for anyone that doesn't currently own a founding Star Garden. They can go to our Twitter at Project Eluune and enter for a chance to win a Star Garden and participate in some of the fun that's going to happen later this week.
Awesome. That's super exciting. Just to elaborate maybe a little bit more. So currently people that do have a founding Star Garden, there is a mini game that is going on. It would just be great to maybe understand the idea behind this mini game as more of the game is developing. What is sort of the main point of having a mini game while you guys seek to build something larger?
Yeah, absolutely. So like one of the things that's super important to us is to build alongside our community. Like we see a ton of, like millions of dollars are spent on games and other products, and when these products come out on the market, nobody wants to use them. This is something that we want to avoid. We want to make sure that we're building alongside the community, testing things with them, and iterating with them. And so like the idea behind the mini game is to basically create a fleshed out version of the actual game where we can still test the core game loops, test the play to earn economy, test the flex systems, the social systems, in a way that's much more accessible, cheaper, and faster to execute. It's also a way for us to engage with the community and learn more from them, because like one of the things we like to say is that our community is our North Star. We learn a lot from them. We love to, like we had ideas of how we wanted to set up our culture, not only in our company, but in our community. And our community was instrumental in helping us shape the culture and also spreading the word and the precepts of our values.
Yeah, that's super awesome. I think we're definitely getting down to the bottom here. I do have a couple more questions I want to squeeze in since we are touching on regards of community. I think it's just very notable how you guys are looking out and doing things that get members who have founding star gardens involved, things like the mini games, and then even what's coming up for people that should be checking out in the Discord, really just making sure that the community is active. There is a community that is happy with what's being built. I think a really big thing I've started to see in Web3 gaming is projects that are really making sure that their community is involved and can see what is happening development wise to make sure that it's something they enjoy. Something that I do think is a really delicate balance. And you guys definitely seem to have thought about this, especially with looking so hard to find your other co-founder. I'm curious what the thoughts are on how do you keep the game fun while also balancing incentives for new players, free players, and paid players, really trying to make sure that everyone can still enjoy the game. It's definitely important, but probably easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, Megan, Megan and I and Ramin have spent months every day on Skype for discussing for hours and hours on how to best set up this first game, how to set up the social infrastructure, the economic infrastructure. And one of the things that we did is instead of building gameplay first and making it fun and then adding the social systems and economic systems, which is a process that the game industry has been doing for years and it doesn't completely work. We did the contrary, where we set up the economic infrastructure, the social infrastructure, making it modular, and then adding a beautiful, amazing game, a fun game on top of it. One of the things that we do is that the game is free to play, so anybody can play the game. The other thing is the game is standalone, so like you don't need a wallet to be able to play it. So like for users who've never interacted with blockchain, who don't even know about blockchain, never actually have to interact with the blockchain to have a very fun social experience on the game. But basically the game is a place where people can slowly be introduced to the economy and decide to opt in the economy on their own terms. The other thing that we do is we're creating systems where and here's a big problem in the MMO in the MMO genre and actually a lot of games. In World of Warcraft or other similar games, new players are never needed. Nobody cares about new players. And the reason why is because when you're a veteran player, you have access to the entire economy, you have access to everything, you don't need anybody to help you. What we do in our game is that we set up a system where players are always interacting with what we call ingredients. So like imagine like wood, flint, like potions, things that they can use to craft rare playable creatures. These ingredients are tied to the blockchain, and the way that we set it up is you are unlocking ingredients every day by just playing the game, but it's tied to your player level, and it's tied to the type of Star Garden that you're on. So like if you guys are on the Star Garden and I'm on my Star Garden, we're gonna yield different kinds of ingredients. But the way that we set up the economy is that if I want to build a playable, if I want to craft a playable NFT creature, I'm gonna use my stash of ingredients, but I'm also gonna need you guys' ingredients, and you're gonna need mine. And this creates interdependency between players. And we push it a little further, where as a player, as you are leveling up, you are getting access to higher tier ingredients, but you're also losing access to lower tier ingredients. And the thing is, you need a shit ton of these lower tier ingredients to craft your rare playable NFT creatures. And that creates a system where new players are always needed in the game because that's the only way that you can have access to these lower ingredients. And so that's how we solve the player census. And a lot of the social systems is just creating the right economic glue that basically ties everybody together, because everybody's needed in the economy and everybody's going in different places. But I need you and you need me to go in the direction that I want to go. Yes, I think that answers the question.
Definitely. And it sounds like that loop is thought out there and really just ties back into this idea of having a tribe or group of players that are battling together within the game and sharing resources and really depending on each other. I think we went over a lot to stay broad, but also tie things up. I think it's always fun to talk to builders in the space of where they see blockchain, Web3 gaming, things that are super exciting. We obviously just touched on that for the past 35 minutes, everything that is very great, what you guys are trying to leverage. I'm curious, where do you think it's important to see the space in 6 months to even longer, 2 to 5 years from now? What are some big things that need to be done to have the space where it is? Maybe issues you see, or where you guys would want to see Project Eluune in 2 to 5 years? I know it's kind of loaded, double-ended question, but just if the space was successful, what would that look like? Where do we need to keep moving towards?
Mego, am I taking this? Are you taking this?
I mean, we both can. If you want to start out, and then I can jump in, whatever you prefer.
Okay. So I think there's two layers for this question. There's the, like, how and where do we see the space in the next years, and how do we want to see it? And then there's also the layer of how do we see our own company in the space. I think one of the investors we were talking with was asking us, why do you guys build on Solana? Why don't you just build on your own blockchain? And one of the things that we said is, we just love the ecosystem. We love the communities that are there. And we love the fact that the precepts of blockchain and Web3 is about building together. And it also ties back in our motto, which is only together we transcend. And I think our goal here is to build not just for us, not just for our community, but also for the ecosystem at large, and learning from them and them learning from us. So like um, one of the things that happened is our one of our engineers built the marketplace for Ori, and they set up in a way that it's open source, so like we can build our own marketplace knowing this knowledge. In the same way, we launched gamified dynamic NFTs for our community, but we set them up in a way that it's open source, and now other people in the ecosystem can learn from us and use it for their games. And I think the idea for us, thinking about the space in the next 2 to 5 years, is we want to see as many companies collaborate and build together, because that's how we move forward fast. That's how we learn to trust each other, and that's where all the boats rise.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everything that Cedric just said. And I think in terms of kind of issues facing the Web3 ecosystem, I think a lot of that in my mind and a lot of the things that need to be solved have to do with easier onboarding, right? Especially for these games, if we want gamers to come over and feel comfortable jumping into these experiences that we're creating, we really have to be thinking about how we make the onboarding into these experiences easier for them in order to really get to mass adoption. And I do think we will get there. I think we're so early, and I think even in the next 6 months, so much is going to be developed and designed that's going to help us. But that's one of the bigger challenges that we're really interested in focusing on.
Yeah, and I think that's really exciting. Something that I related with a lot that people have mentioned is when Cedric was mentioning things like open source infrastructure and tooling. There's been so much that studios and that teams have had to build infrastructure wise to be able to have things like marketplaces. And moving forward, there's just going to be more and more things that are needed, tools to help monitor game economies and all of these things. So seeing that there are people in the space who are looking to, one, pioneer and develop these things, but also share them with the community to move everyone forward as a whole, which kind of circulates back to Project Eluune's model of everyone transcending together. So I think that is something that is also very exciting about Web3. And as it moves forward, more and more of this infrastructure will be built out. And that was something that I very much resonated with. Overall, this really wraps it up for me. Cedric and Meg, I want to,
Greg,
yeah,
I have
jump
another
in.
thing. You just made me realize something that I think is just interesting to this conversation. It goes
Yeah.
back to the earlier uh, thoughts that you had around the metaverse, and I think that as you were saying, tons of companies have different approaches to get into the metaverse and thinking about this. But I think there's two things that we don't really talk about, which is the metaverse is going to be a place where millions and millions of humans can basically be together, evolve into different realms, uh, transport themselves into different worlds, different games, different experiences. But the one of the interesting thing there is that it's going to be a super social place. It's going to be similar to the real world. And we don't want, like, the real world. If you go in a club or in a bar, or even in restaurants, it would be very weird if somebody who's super toxic came into the restaurant and was starting to make a mess. Like, that person would be kicked out right away. It's very hard to do the same thing in a game or on social media. And so I think that one of the things that we need to think more about is, how do we build this social infrastructure? How do we think about building digital spaces where people feel safe but also excited to be together and be given the opportunity to make meaningful relationships? That's the first thing. The second thing is, the metaverse is also going to be a place of transaction and a place of exchange between people. And what we see with the traditional economy in the real world is that the economy also acts as a social glue between people. The ability for people to transact with each other, because everybody needs each other, really helps in building social connections. And that's the thing that I think play to earn games can help solve, is building the economic infrastructure that can be used in a metaverse in a way where people are not getting scammed, in a way where people can build value but also retain it, and at scale. And that, I think, that's going to be fascinating to see and arrive at. Going back to what you were saying, thinking about where we will be in 2 to 5 years, Arrivant will have built this social infrastructure, economic infrastructure in our first game, in our second game, and now we're able to export this knowledge to other companies, other games in the world.
100%. And I think that's also something that's very notable here, is that you guys are a studio and you're looking to not only build multiple games, but a complete social infrastructure. And you guys are building everything that is needed for that moving forward. And really, to go full circle here, tying back into those two pillars, and I'm probably going to butcher them by now, but it's the idea of uplifting players, but then also creating something that is extremely social and ties players together and is connected and fun. And I think this is something that gaming has always looked to do, but has gotten more and more amplified as we've moved forward, figured out ways to tie in open economies and really have this glue between players. And then doubling down on social experiences, I think, is incredibly important. So I think we can leave this here, but in that regard, it sounds like there's so much coming out of Project Eluune in the future. You guys are really just getting started. There's the mini game, but there's so much more for players to look forward to. So, with all of that being said, we'll definitely be hearing a lot more from you guys at Arrivant as development continues. It's super exciting to see the team that has really gotten behind this and that is looking to build. Cedric and Meg, I want to thank you guys so much for coming on, and just open it up if you have anything else you want to close up with.
Thank you so much. I mean, this is, we love being able to share our vision with like-minded people, and it was really an honor to be here. Thank you so much for your questions. They were very interesting. And the last thing I want to say is, our community is our North Star, and Megan can add the motto.
Yes, I echo everything Cedric just said. It's so nice to talk with you, and we always are open to, talking with people in the ecosystem, hearing their feedback, iterating. So it's always a pleasure to meet new people who are building in this space and who are talking with different projects all the time, because that's when we have some of the most interesting conversations. So thank you for all of your questions and your thoughtfulness today.
Of course, definitely. Looking forward to what you guys continue to put out. And then just want to thank everyone that tuned in. We'll definitely be checking out more and more that's going on with Project Eluune. With that being said, peace out, everyone, and thanks for watching.